What would you do if the person you trusted most was also the one holding the knife behind your back? This is the story of two brothers, Robin Nicholas and Daniel Nicholas. To the outside world, Robin was the responsible one. Dependable, devoted, protective. The kind of man any family would lean on in a time of crisis. But by the end of the story, you'll see how appearances can deceive. Because in this case, the person who looked like a victim was hiding something far darker. And when the truth finally came to light, it ended not with justice, but with blood. Robin Nicholas, 38, was a school teacher, respected, soft-spoken, the kind of man students remembered years later. He lived a modest life in the small town of Graywood, sharing a 2-story house with his younger brother Daniel. Daniel Nicholas was 35, and life had been harder on him. He worked irregular shifts at a warehouse, struggled financially, and often leaned on Robin for support. To outsiders, Robin was the caretaker, and Daniel was the one who needed looking after. The Nicholas brothers were inseparable, or so it seemed. They grew up in the same house they still lived in, their parents long gone, leaving only memories and the weight of family responsibility. But in October of 2019, Graywood was shaken when a frantic 911 call came in. The voice on the other end was Robin's. His words were panicked, broken. "My brother, he's dead. Someone's killed him." Police arrived to find Daniel Nicholas in the basement of the family home. He had been stabbed multiple times. The scene was brutal. Blood smeared on the floor, overturned furniture, and a trail of muddy footprints leading toward the stairs. Robin was distraught, trembling, insisting that he'd been upstairs grading papers when he heard the commotion. He said he ran down only to find his brother lying in a pool of blood. But even in that first hour, something about Robin's story didn't add up. And what investigators uncovered would turn this case upside down. In the hours after the crime, Robin Nicholas was the image of devastation. Detectives who arrived at the Nicholas home described him as pale, shaking, his voice breaking as he repeated, "I don't understand. Who would do this to my brother?" At first glance, it looked like a textbook case of a home invasion gone wrong. The basement window had been cracked open. Daniel had clearly fought his attacker. Defensive wounds on his arms, bruises on his knuckles. The muddy footprints on the basement floor seemed to support the theory that someone from outside had entered. But here's where suspicion began to creep in. The footprints didn't lead out. They trailed down into the basement, stopping at Daniel's body. None led back toward the window or the stairs. Investigators asked themselves, if someone broke in, killed Daniel, and left, why weren't there exit prints? And then there was Robin himself. His account was simple. He said he'd been upstairs at his desk, grading assignments, when he heard noises. By the time he rushed downstairs, it was already too late. But detectives noticed something odd. For a man who had supposedly found his brother moments after his murder, Robin's clothes were clean. No blood, no smears, no sign he'd try to help Daniel in those critical moments. When asked why, Robin gave a flat response. He was already gone. There was nothing I could do. It unsettled the room, because every officer present had seen countless family members react to loss. Clawing at the victim, trying CPR, covered in blood from desperate attempts to save their loved one. Robin showed none of that. He had stood back, watched, called, but not touched. And soon, more inconsistencies piled up. A neighbor reported that she had seen Daniel earlier that evening, around 8 p.m., arguing with someone in the driveway. She couldn't make out the words, but she described the silhouette. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a slight limp. Detectives looked at Robin. At 6'1", he matched the height and build, and though subtle, he had developed a slight limp after a knee surgery 2 years earlier. When confronted, Robin shook his head. He said he had been home the entire evening. He said Daniel had enemies, people he owed money to, people he'd argued with at the warehouse. He was reckless, Robin said. He didn't think things through. I warned him this would happen. It was subtle, but for the first time, Robin had shifted the focus, painting his dead brother as careless, irresponsible, almost to blame for his own murder. The officers didn't say it aloud, but a seed had been planted. Was Robin grieving? Or was he laying the groundwork for a story that excused his own role? Then came the first real turning point. When forensics examined the basement, they noticed something strange about the so-called break-in. The lock on the basement window hadn't been forced from the outside. It had been pried from within. To anyone glancing quickly, it looked like a break-in, but closer inspection showed the truth. Someone inside the house had staged it, and that someone could only be Robin or Daniel. But Daniel was dead. That left one person, Robin Nicholas. From that moment on, investigators stopped looking for an intruder. Instead, they began to quietly build a case against the grieving brother who claimed to be innocent, and what they would uncover in the following days would flip every assumption upside down. Once detectives realized the break-in was staged, their perspective shifted completely. Robin Nicholas was no longer a grieving brother. He was a suspect, one they needed to handle delicately, because if Robin truly was the killer, he had already shown he was capable of deception, capable of composure in front of authority, and capable of violence. So they began quietly dissecting his life. The first stop was the warehouse where Daniel worked. Co-workers there had plenty to say, and their accounts painted a far less simple picture of the Nicholas brothers. According to Daniel's colleagues, he often complained about Robin. Not about mistreatment, but about control. Daniel reportedly told friends that living with his older brother felt less like family and more like being under constant surveillance. "He's always checking what I do," Daniel once muttered to a co-worker. "Like I'm a kid, like I can't breathe without him watching." One man recalled Daniel joking bitterly, "I may as well be his son, not his brother. He keeps the money. He makes the rules. He decides everything." At first, investigators brushed this off as sibling tension, but when they examined the Nicholas household finances, the truth became harder to ignore. Though Daniel had been employed for years, his personal bank account was nearly empty. Meanwhile, Robin's account showed steady deposits, not only from his teaching salary, but also from Daniel's paycheck. When asked why, Robin claimed Daniel was careless with money, that it was easier if he handled both accounts. He framed it as protection, as responsibility, but to detectives, it looked less like support and more like domination. And then came the discovery that shifted suspicion to certainty. During a sweep of the house, investigators searched Robin's desk, the one where he claimed to have been grading papers the night Daniel was killed. In a locked drawer, they found documents that made their blood run cold. A draft of Daniel's will, not notarized, not finalized, but typed out, ready to sign. and in that draft, the primary beneficiary was Robin Nicholas. Detectives confronted Robin about this, and his explanation was almost too calm. It was just paperwork. Daniel wanted me to handle things in case something happened. But the timeline made no sense. The will had been created 2 weeks before Daniel's death, and more damning, Daniel's friend swore he had never mentioned planning a will at all. Piece by piece, Robin's carefully built image of innocence began to collapse. Still, investigators knew suspicion wasn't enough. They needed something concrete, so they began watching him literally. A surveillance team was assigned to Robin's movements. They expected a man in mourning. What they saw instead was a man almost rehearsed in his grief. He attended Daniel's small memorial at the warehouse, shaking hands, lowering his voice at just the right moments, thanking people for their sympathy. But his performance cracked when he thought no one was looking. After one memorial gathering, investigators noted Robin leaving early, walking briskly to his car. He sat inside for 20 minutes, expression blank, no tears, no emotion, just staring straight ahead. And then there was the visit to the cemetery. Detectives followed him as he placed flowers at Daniel's grave. For most, it would be a moment of solemn reflection. For Robin, it was something else. He stayed for less than 2 minutes. He didn't pray. He didn't kneel. He simply laid the flowers down, looked around the cemetery as if scanning the horizon, and left. It wasn't what he did that alarmed detectives. It was what he didn't do. The absence of grief, the absence of weight, as though Daniel's death was not a loss, but the closing of a chapter Robin had written himself. And then came the turning point investigators had been waiting for. Lab results returned on the muddy footprints found in the basement. The mud wasn't random. It came from a patch of soil in the Nicholas backyard, a place where Robin often worked in his small garden, meaning the footprints weren't from an intruder, they were his. Robin Nicholas, the grieving brother, had staged the crime scene with dirt from his own backyard. The evidence was damning, but investigators weren't prepared for how dangerous Robin would become when cornered, because in cases like this, when truth catches up with lies, people either break down or lash out. And Robin Nicholas was not the type to break down. What investigators didn't yet realize was that Robin had his own plan, one that would leave them, and everyone who thought they knew him, shocked at how far he was willing to go. By the time investigators had the footprint evidence in hand, their case against Robin Nicholas was strong, but it wasn't airtight. Circumstantial evidence could be explained away, and Robin had proven himself disturbingly calm under questioning. They decided it was time for something more direct, a carefully staged confrontation. Detectives invited Robin back to the precinct under the pretense of clarifying financial records. It was a test. They wanted to observe him in controlled conditions, press him on inconsistencies, and see if his mask would finally crack. The interview began like so many others. Robin in his pressed shirt, sitting neatly, legs crossed, speaking in the same measured tone he'd used from day one. "I've told you everything," he said. "I was grading papers. I heard nothing unusual. I woke up, and Daniel was gone." But the detectives didn't argue. Not at first. Instead, they let silence hang in the room. They watched him squirm, and for the first time, he did. When they brought up the will, his face tightened. When they mentioned Daniel's co-workers, describing Robin as controlling, his eyes flickered. and when they slid a folder across the table containing photos of the muddy footprint samples matched to his own backyard, his composure faltered. His hand twitched, his jaw clenched, and he said something unexpected. "Do you know what it's like carrying someone your entire life, feeding them, sheltering them, protecting them, while they waste every chance they're given?" The words slipped out like venom, not the grief of a brother, but the resentment of a man who felt owed. The detectives pressed harder, pushing at that crack. One leaned forward, voice sharp. "Robin, you staged the break-in. You took Daniel's paycheck. You wrote his will. Tell us why. Tell us what you did to him." For the first time, Robin snapped. He slammed his fist on the table, eyes flashing with a mix of rage and something darker. "You think you understand? You think Daniel was a victim? He was weak. He was a burden. He let me do everything for him. And then he had the nerve to complain. He didn't deserve the life I gave him." There it was, the confession, but not the neat one detectives expected. It wasn't just about control or money. It was about identity. Robin hadn't been protecting Daniel. He had been suffocating him, molding him into a dependent shadow. And when Daniel finally resisted, when he pushed back against his brother's grip, Robin eliminated him. Still, the story wasn't finished, because even as Robin's words confirmed his guilt, detectives didn't anticipate what would happen next. On the night of his arrest, Robin requested to use the restroom before transport. An officer escorted him, but in a moment of distraction, a phone ringing, a set of keys clattering to the ground, Robin made his move. He shoved the officer, bolted down the hallway, and sprinted toward the stairwell. Security cameras caught every frantic second. His shoes pounding against the tile, his breathing ragged, the pounding echo of footsteps behind him. This wasn't the calm, composed man investigators had known. This was raw desperation. He burst through the stairwell door and tore down the steps, leaping entire flights, his shirt catching on the railings, his voice echoing in guttural gasps. Detectives yelled after him. Officers radioed in. Alarms blared. Robin was running not just from the building, but from the walls of his own deception collapsing in on him. He reached the ground floor, pushed through an emergency exit, and stumbled into the night. Rain had begun to fall, slicking the pavement, reflecting the flashing red of the alarm lights behind him. But fate has a way of catching those who believe they're untouchable. As Robin darted into the street, headlights cut through the rain. A delivery truck, unable to stop in time, struck him full force. The impact was instant, brutal, final. Robin Nicholas, the brother who pretended to be a guardian, the man who staged himself as a victim, lay lifeless on the wet asphalt, his own lies catching up to him faster than justice ever could. And just like that, the story ended not with a trial, not with a jury, not with years behind bars, but with a sudden, violent reckoning. The truth had finally surfaced, and it had destroyed him. Robin Nicholas's story ended in the street, not in a courtroom, no final testimony, no closing arguments, no sentencing, just a body lying in the rain. A man destroyed not by justice, but by his own desperation. For investigators, the case was technically solved. Daniel's killer was dead. The evidence, the forged will, the staged break-in, the financial trail, all pointed to Robin. There would be no appeals, no drawn-out trial, no chance for the public to watch his downfall unfold across months of headlines. But for Daniel's neighbors and friends, closure never came so neatly. They were left with more questions than answers. Was Robin always this way? Was he a calculating manipulator from the start? Or a man slowly twisted by years of resentment and perceived sacrifice? Was Daniel truly as dependent as Robin claimed? Or was that just the story Robin told himself to justify his control? And perhaps the darkest question of all, if Robin hadn't panicked, if he hadn't run that night, would we ever have heard his full truth? Or did he take secrets to his grave that no one will ever uncover? This case forces us to reconsider the stories we tell about family. We like to believe blood is thicker than water, that siblings protect one another. But sometimes, family ties are not ropes that hold us together. They are chains that pull us under. Robin Nicholas was no protector. He was no guardian. He was not, in the end, his brother's keeper. And now, I turn the question to you. What do you think? Was Robin a man corrupted by resentment, or was he evil from the very beginning? Do you believe justice was served when his life ended so abruptly? Or does the truth remain buried with him? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story gripped you as much as it did me, don't forget to subscribe, because every day, we uncover another case where the line between love and control, between family and betrayal, is never as clear as it seems. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and remember, sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who claim to protect us.